Hello y'all, it has been a minute since we have done one of our deck techs, but I'm back. I'm gonna kind of do these probably every standard legal set. That's about all I can manage, but y'all been showing me a lot of support and a lot of love, so thank you. But I don't want to waste too much time because I'm honestly very excited about today's Commander deck tech video because it is for a Planeswalker that I have liked ever since I discovered her back in Modern Horizons 2. And I've wanted to have as commander for a very long time, and it is Dihada, Binder of Wills. Let's get into it. And let's begin this by taking a look at Dihada, Binder of Wills herself. A 4-mana, 5 loyalty Planeswalker that costs 1, a red, a white, and a black that reads, +2 loyalty, up to 1 target legendary creature gains vigilance, lifelink, and indestructible until your next turn. Yes, that says until your next turn, not until the end of this turn. That's important, let's remember that. Her -3 loyalty reads, reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put any number of legendary cards from among them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. Create a treasure token for each card put into your graveyard this way. Let's talk about how that reads. Any number, meaning we can choose to put all 4 cards in the graveyard if we wish to just give us 4 treasures. And her ultimate, which is a -11 loyalty ability, reads, gain control of all non-land permanents until end of turn. Untap them, they gain haste until end of turn. And of course, she can be your commander. This Planeswalker, I think, is deceptively powerful, and I'm excited to get into what we have in store. But before we do that, I want to talk about what our goal of the deck is. I want to be a interactive, strong, powerful deck, and I'm not really holding back when it comes in terms to budget. However, I'm not looking to run any kind of combos, so if you're looking to play some sort of combos in the deck, look elsewhere. But with that in mind, let's get started and take a look at our suite of artifacts. Like every other deck in Magic, we're going to be running our Soul Rings, Signets, etc. So I don't want to waste too much time discussing those. I would rather spend more time discussing some of the more unique artifacts that we have going for us. Starting with Mox Amber, a nice little mana ramp that costs 0. It's legendary, so we can hit it with Dihada. We're also running a Gerard's Hourglass Pendant. This is a new card from the pre-constructed deck that comes with her. And it is a 1-mana flash. If a player were to begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead, and you can pay 4 mana, tap it, and exile it to return to the battlefield tapped all artifact, creature, enchantment, and land cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. I have been looking for a card like this for a long time in Magic. I hate sitting and watching extra turns, so I'm very happy to see this. But most importantly, we are running Luxior, Giada's Gift. This is a great artifact if your commander is a Planeswalker, but it is actually particularly fun with Dihada because Dihada can target herself. Because this allows you to pay 1 to equip to a Planeswalker, to give it equip permanent isn't a Planeswalker and is a creature in addition to its other types, and its loyalty abilities can still be activated. And equipped creature will get +1/1 for each counter on it. So if we play this and equipped it to Dihada, we could +2 her to give herself vigilance, lifelink, and indestructible, and she'd become a 7/7 in theory. That is so good, and that is commander damage as well. Like, yes, Luxior Giada's Gift is an absolute must. Giada sounds like Dihada, and there's a reason. Put this in your deck. And I'm also taking a look at the Reaver Cleaver. I haven't gotten to play this one just yet because it's a newer card, but I think it has quite a lot of potential since we're going to be running some treasure synergies in this deck. And it's legendary. I am a little bit worried about its total cost, so keep an eye on my final deck list to see if the Reaver Cleaver makes the cut. That's it though in terms of artifacts. Now let's take a look at our enchantments. We are going to be running 6 enchantments total in our deck, 2 of which are legendary, so let's start with those. I've included Oath of Gideon and Oath of Liliana in our deck, both of which are 3 mana and are legendary enchantments. Oath of Liliana reads, when it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature, and at the beginning of each end step, if a Planeswalker entered the battlefield under your control this turn, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. An Oath of Gideon reads, when it enters the battlefield, put 2/1/1 core ally creature tokens onto the battlefield, and each planeswalker you control enters the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter on it. I like these because there's not very many legendary enchantments that I find super usable. They create blockers for Dihada while also clearing the way for her or giving her a little bit more extra life. In addition, we're running Monologue Tax and Smothering Tithe to kind of lean into our treasure themes, Phyrexian Arena for the draw, and Cunning Rhetoric to protect Dihada. This is one of my favorite cards as of late, and I think we are going to get an incredible amount of value out of it if people are swinging at Dihada to stop her from ulting, or they won't swing at Dihada because they don't like the effect, therefore keeping our Dihada in play, which is exactly what we want. But with our artifacts and enchantments now addressed, let's take a look at the big grand army Dihada has enlisted for herself. Now, our army of legendary creatures is going to be the most important part of this deck, so we're going to split this into a couple different sections, but first let's start with the creatures that care about our secondary theme, which is treasures. We are running Kalain Reclusive Painter, Magda, Brazen Outlaw, Captain Lannery Storm, and Goldspan Dragon. Now, Goldspan Dragon is the only non-legendary creature that we'll be running in this deck, but he just offers too much value and is also able to be fetched by Magda, who is also able to fetch our Luxior if we need her to, or our, spoiler alert, Bladewing Deathless Tyrant. And while that 5 treasures might seem like a steep cost, our commander can create 4, so we don't really have to worry about getting to 5 very much. Captain Lannery Storm seems pretty obvious as well, since she can create treasures while she attacks, and she's also able to reward herself for when we use our treasures. And speaking of rewarding for using treasures, Kalain Reclusive Painter will ramp us a little bit by creating a treasure herself, and will more importantly give us big bonuses when we use our treasures to cash out on some of our big legendary creatures. Now let's take a look at other creatures that are 1 to 3 mana value. These are the creatures that I like to think of as escorts to complement Dihada. Now these are the creatures that we want to have in play before we play Dihada, so we can either use them as defense if we want to cash in and make some treasures, or as creatures we could target if we want a +2 Dihada. Now I'm not going to repeat any creatures that I've already said before, so when I'm going through the list, if I've mentioned a creature already, we've discussed it, that's why we're not mentioning it again. Starting at 1 mana, we have Hope of Girapur and Yoshimaru the Ever Faithful. Yoshimaru is a creature that can continue to offer us value just for playing our deck and grow from being just his little one oneself to a giant monster of death and destruction. And Hope of Girapur is a 1/1 flying blocker and has an added benefit of being able to be sacrificed to stop a player from doing any kind of non-creature spells if we hit them with Hope of Girapur. So these are 2 1-drops that we will see value with later on in the game, even if we draw them later. Then, moving on to 2 mana, we have Goro, Disciple of Ryusei, who is a 2/2 Goblin Samurai that lets us pay red to give our creatures haste until end of turn, which is going to be huge for us, given that we have a good chunk of things to reanimate. And he also has the ability to pay 5 to make a 5/5 if you control an attacking modified creature. That is not so much something we're worried about, but it's also definitely possible. We also have Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger, who should be very easy to escape, given that our commander lets us fill up our graveyard very easily. And then, moving on to the 3 mana, which is our sweet spot, we have Alesha, who smiles at death, who lets us resurrect any of our creatures that have power 2 or less when she attacks, if we just invest a little bit of mana. Birgi, God of Storytelling, who can transform into the Horn of Bounty. Either side of this is useful for us. We have Mila, Crafty Companion, a 3 mana 2/3 that reads, whenever an opponent attacks 1 or more planeswalkers you control, put a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. And whenever a permanent you control becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. So this is the perfect guard dog for Dihada. And if we need to, we can also use the flip side, but I don't honestly really care about the flip side very much, so that's just an added bonus. Then we have Rem Karalos, Stalwart Slayer, another flying blocker, who also has haste and is a 2/3 that reads, if a spell would deal damage to you or another permanent you control, prevent that damage. This protects Dihada from any kind of burn damage, and also has the added benefit of if a spell would deal damage to an opponent or an opponent's permanent, it deals an additional damage. which is nice. We don't really even care too much about that, but hey, we might get value out of it. What we're really running regardless for is a protection on Dihada and also having a flying haste creature. Then we have Thalia, Heretic Cathar, who is a 3/2 first strike that causes creatures on non-basic lands your opponents control to enter the battlefield tapped. This is great. It's an additional way to protect Dihada by forcing creatures to enter tapped, and she has first strike, which is an even greater reason to not swing at our Dihada. Then we have Vito, Thorn of the Duskrose, as our last 3-mana creature. He's a 1/3 that reads whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. This is huge because our commander gives a lifelink, so Vito can do even more damage with the life that we gain, plus he has the added benefit of being able to pay 5 to just give all of our creatures lifelink if we need to. With our escorts now looked at, let's look at the creatures that we could potentially summon right away if we use all 4 treasures we play with Dihada. So in a way, we're looking at these as our flash combos, or creatures that can be snuck out alongside Dihada. Now, we don't have a ton of creatures in the 4-mana slot, but we do have a handful that give us a nice selection of options to accompany Dihada. We have Chainer, Nightmare Adept, who's an option to play when we need to start resurrecting things from our graveyard or wanting to pitch cards from our hand. Carter, Doom Scourge, who can protect Dihada the moment he comes down by goading all of our creatures our opponents control. Neheb, Dreadhorde Champion. Shanid, or Shanid, Sleeper's Scourge, who gives us card draw just for doing what our deck wants to do, which is playing legendary lands and casting legendary spells. Plus, she gives our legendary creatures Menace. We have Tishar, Ancestor's Apostle, who can resurrect any of the creatures that we talked about in the earlier section. And lastly, we have Traxos, Scourge of Krug, who's a 7/7 Trampler for 4 mana. And since our commander gives Vigilance, we get around his little doesn't untap during your untap step, but truthfully, that's not even that much of a problem given the fact that we are going to be casting so many historic spells. Now lastly, let's look at our top end of creatures. These are the creatures we are wanting to use to propel ourselves to victory. And these are the creatures that are the big shiny wow. The creatures that we're so happy Dihada has brought into her power. Let's get into it. Now starting at the 5-mana slot, we have Garner the Bloodflame, God Eternal Oketra, and the Red Praetor himself, Urabrask. Each of these creatures are strong with good effects and offers passive benefits. Garner gives our creatures haste, while also returning the cards that we dump to our graveyard from anywhere. God Eternal Oketra rewards us for playing our creatures by giving us more creatures with Vigilance. And Urabrask is another haste enabler that also forces our opponent's creatures to enter the battlefield tapped. Moving on to the 6-mana slot, we only have one glorious, beautiful bride, Olivia, Crimson Bride. A 6-mana 3/4 with flying haste that allows us to resurrect a creature tapped and attacking whenever Olivia attacks. However, that creature will leave play if Olivia ever leaves play herself. So it's a good thing we have that indestructible that we can slap on to Olivia. Then, towards our top end bracket at 7 mana, we have Bladewing, Deathless Tyrant, a new card from the pre-constructed deck that we're keeping in the deck because he rewards us big time for hitting our opponents since we're going to be filling up our graveyard. He's able to be cheated out by Magda, as we hinted, and Olivia as well. We have Elish Norn, Gisela, Blade of Goldnight, Kervek, the Merciless, who is a fun inclusion for the fact that Dihada gives the lifelink, and Kervek doing the damage himself will total us some big life total gains, which also equals damage if we have Veto out. And since he's going to be having that glorious indestructible protection, Kervek will be able to churn out big value, as our opponents won't be able to deal with him. We also have Sheoldred, the Whispering One. And at the very top end, and our grandmother of all monsters, we have Emrakul, the Promised End. Another legendary creature that enjoys us having cards in our graveyard, and is a game-winning piece if we get this on board. It has the ability to enslave our opponents, which just felt on brand for Dihada, but is also a 13/13 flying trample protection from instants, and could also potentially get lifelink indestructible in Vigilance. We have a nice suite of creatures here, all of which are threatening, horrifying, and will be certain to bring about the doom of our opponents. Now we have one last thing that we need to look at, our sorceries and instants. Now let's start with our instants, and we'll just go in order of mana cost. At 1 mana, we have Pyroblast and Swords to Plowshare, some staple 1 mana cards, one that helps us deal with any kind of pesky blue problems, like that Cyclonic Rift, and Swords to Plowshare because it's sometimes nice to just say no to that big scary creature across the board. Speaking of saying no to creatures, at 2 mana we have Terminate, and then at 3 mana we have Anguished Unmaking, Deflecting Swat, and Teferi's Protection, all powerful spells that can be used when we're in a bind. Then at 4 mana, we have Deadly Rollick, which hopefully we'll be able to pull off for free with the Commander Clause it has attached to it. And then at 5 mana, we have Ink Shield and Volcanic Offering. Ink Shield is a great card to play when we're in a bind, and we should have lots of mana open with the additional treasures that we create to be able to play this in a less obvious way. And Volcanic Offering will help us wipe the board of some problematic creatures, while also wiping the board of some problematic lands, which continue to be on a rise in Commander. And yeah, I'm looking at you, Field of the Dead. Now for our sorceries, we have Faithless Looting, which is nice because we can activate it from our graveyard if we happen to dump it. Agadeem's Awakening, which doubles as a land, and a resurrection effect for us. Jessica's Will, which is honestly, Jessica's Will. I don't even feel the need to defend this. We're rad, we're running Jessica's Will. We have Damnation, to wipe the board of creatures. And then we have some of our legendary sorceries. We have Yawgmoth's Vile Offering, which lets us deal with the creature and resurrect a creature. And we have Urza's Ruinous Blast, which lets us completely reset the board aside from legendary permanents, which for the most part is going to be our entire board. Then at the top end of one of our win conditions, we have Primeval's Glorious Rebirth, which allows us to return all legendary permanent cards from our graveyard to the battlefield. This could hit enchantments for us, this could hit artifacts for us, this could hit planeswalkers, and every single creature besides one. Primeval's Glorious Rebirth is one of our biggest win conditions in the deck, and especially since we're more than likely resurrecting something that gives our board haste, we'll be able to resurrect and swing for the win in one go. Okay, you guys, that will bring us to the end of our Dihada deck track. I hope you guys liked it. I've probably missed some stuff, as I always do, given the fact that the cards are new when I make these, but I'm excited to see what you guys have to tell me about down below in the comments. That being said, are you going to be getting the Dihada Commander deck, or are you going to go get that loser Mr. Carthalion? I'm just saying. Dihada, Immortal Sorceress, Planeswalker, versus Buff Hunky Hercules wannabe. You know, I'm just saying, options. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you give it a thumbs up, and a subscription would always be nice, but also, if you didn't like it that much, I guess just don't. But I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!